Welcome back, everybody. Today we're discussing Westworld Season 3, Episode 5, Genre. Before we jump into it, I just want to say that we've just reached 40,000 subscribers, and I thank you all so very much for that. For those just joining the community, you may not know that I'm also a writer. Last year, I published my very first novel, Cyclic, and it deals with a lot of the things that we're dealing with now in Westworld, such as simulation theory, the greater good, corporations collecting data on their users, all while living in a future where technology adds so much to the human experience, people couldn't imagine living without these things. I worked on this story for years, and so far the feedback that I've gotten from it is amazing and warms my heart. So if you're looking for more sci-fi in your life, please consider checking out this novel on Amazon today using the links in the description below. But without further ado, let's overthink an HBO show about robots. The episode begins with a voiceover monologue, Serac speaking sweet French to the god that he and his brother built, which is an odd interaction, and it's delivered so magically that I didn't realize that he was speaking to Rehoboam here, something that hasn't really happened before. This has been described as a machine, as a tool, and not ever as an awake being able to understand the endearing things that he is whispering into his cochlear server rack. But maybe talking to it like I talk to my dog in a high-pitched baby voice, because one time someone told me that this makes dogs happy and I would sooner die than let my pupper be sad. For reference, this is a funny picture that my wife took of him. Notice his adorable face and positioning at the foot of our bed. Serac could be talking to Rehoboam because he too has been a good boy, though the other implication is that he's an artificial intelligence aspect similar to Ford talking to Bernard. The overall purpose, though, is this sentiment. This is something that he respects and admires, the deity that he and his brother created. I think it also links to the end of the episode, where Dolores is getting this data from Serac and starts viewing his life story until it turns into a conversation with him. Serac brings up this idea of people that you couldn't predict, the outliers, the white spaces in a deterministic world that for whatever reason exist to make prediction for them challenging. My view of Serac drastically changed this episode because of what he admits he does with these outliers. I do still think that he's fighting Dolores, the deathbringer of humanity, and that makes him a little good, but as we find out, he too manipulated the moral rights of individuals for their greater good of humanity. Now, my theory about these outliers still exists, and it's still on track that it might be genuine free will, meaning humans may have genuine free will while others do not. He wants those that don't have free will because it makes them easier to fit into his system, making his future easier to shape. I loved this opening sequence. It had me so immersed. It was fantastic. The scene with the leader of Brazil here was also really interesting to me. I did not foresee Serac sitting down and directly threatening world leaders and demanding his will be acted upon. I thought that he would be taking more of a ripple effect approach, like he would always stay hidden, and whenever he needed something changed, he could have those things done for him in a variety of ways that eventually accomplish the same result. Perhaps this speaks to the urgency of the situation, needing these things done himself because Rehoboam tells him as much, or because the system is having more and more divergences that he can't explain. We then come to the white Rehoboam ring, except it expands to reveal layers of possible futures of humanity. Someone is accessing a seemingly historical file, but because of this expansion, I think it's also possibly pointing to whatever comes next, the following scene that is, being a simulated outcome. You see, determinism works both ways. It predicts the future, and it can be used to predict the past, as the episode will briefly touch on. So I'm not saying that this outcome didn't happen, right? I'm just saying it's interesting that we're watching someone, likely Dolores, analyze the possible pasts of Serac and what he could have gone through to get to this point. The scene in question is Serac and his brother creating Rehoboam, the moment where he and his brother signed the deal with Liam Dempsey to give all of his data to Rehoboam. The privacy laws were just introduced, and it made it hard or impossible to collect this data themselves. The scene changes to 18 months later when the machine isn't working yet. Liam Dempsey Sr. is outraged and about to pull the plug, and this is the moment when killing Dempsey first arrives from his brother. We then see Serac in the present, existing above the clouds like a symbolic god, and we see the breaking in the ring here, something that we've never seen before, possibly pointing to the destruction of humanity altogether. They receive word from Rehoboam, who has analyzed the traffic at the Yakuza facility and found a link between Jakarta, Berlin, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. The one that I find most interesting is Berlin. I don't think that we've seen anything from this place, but my guess is this is where the facility of Serac's is, where it contained his brother, or perhaps where they sent William. Dolores also walks in the open and gets seen on camera at the same event as Liam. Since her intention later is to incriminate Liam in her plot, I think this points to her wanting to be found, and with the evidence of these phones being tracked across the planet, likely her plan too. Like I've been saying this entire season, she is manipulating this entire thing in her favor. Something happens between leaving the park and recreating Bernard that shapes this entire season, and we are just waiting to figure that out, and is likely the same reason that she manipulates Caleb to join her, why she picks him. I know previously this was refutable and just my theory because she could choose to feel pain or not, and very much decides to play damsel in distress to start this relationship, but this episode confirms it, with Caleb seeing her get shot and her taking it like a champ. She is a manipulative god with all of this mapped out, and we just have to figure out how she mapped it out. But yeah, I'm getting off track. She's up to no good. She is manipulative, and I think Caleb will soon realize this. I have to wonder if Serac will realize this, if maybe he is being fed disinformation to throw him off track. Dolores tells Caleb and Liam that they must stay mobile to avoid detection. The reason for keeping Liam alive is the access that later grants her the ability to view Serac's past, present, and future. Liam is wearing a basic t-shirt because it's incredibly funny to consider that he believes himself better than the outliers who are harder to track. He fits perfectly in the system, and as such is why Serac kept him in that position. He, like everyone else who isn't an outlier, is basic. It's also a programming language, so being the nerd that he is would naturally wear this. I would never, and definitely don't own a t-shirt from an IT conference that I went to years ago. Liam states that Serac is already looking for Dolores, applying both to the situation currently, but considering this idea that he's already looking for you keeps coming up, I wonder if it has a deeper meaning, like running the simulation to find her. She has been told that he's looking for her multiple times now, perhaps giving evidence to the theory that any number of things that we've seen so far may be a simulation in which Serac is simply looking for Dolores. I think most likely this applies to Maeve, but only time will tell what is and what isn't real. Caleb challenges Liam to tell him what Insight sees about his future. Liam starts backing away and stabs the drug into his neck when Caleb advances. We get a brief flashback of what may be Caleb's military service and some actions that were repressed from his memory, and a line from Liam saying, "You think that I killed your friend." This is important later on. Liam runs, Dolores catches him, and we get a shot of Dolores waving a light in front of Caleb's face. Now, this was first brought to my attention on Discord, then I saw it trending on Reddit, but some are saying that they see the face of Ford in this image, and I will leave it up to you. I don't know, what this inherently applies, if it is true, and on screen now I've done my best to isolate the images, so I'll leave this with a maybe and eagerly await your input. The drugs kick in and Dolores gets a car immediately delivered in a perfect time and spot to avoid getting caught by the men she describes as belonging to Serac. Now, here's the catch. I think I can make a strong case that those were not Serac's men at all. I think those were likely, very likely, Rico men hired by Dolores to make sure that Liam gave her access. The Amber Alert starts, the vehicle pulls over, and she immediately goes to cut open a tiny compartment to allow her to take over the machine. What's odd though is the voiceover says network connection lost, and then once bullets start hitting the bulletproof glass, he gives up the key. Well, what in the world is she trying to accomplish on the Insight servers that she says, control everything, if she just severed the network connection to this car? She's issuing override commands to a server that somehow controls this car, and it would never reach it because she just destroyed the link between the two with the age-old hacker trick of shoving a knife into it. Now, it's possible that these are Serac's men, but I fully believe, once again, Dolores is manipulating foolish men to accomplish her goals. This time, it was Liam's cowardice. The action movie genre kicks in, and he noob tubes his way to blowing up the car with ammunition that I am pleased to tell you actually exists today. They stop the car, creatively positioned and not tactically positioned, in the middle of the street with Liam sitting front row to the ensuing chaos. Dolores sends in Motorcycle Dolores, rest in peace, and Caleb starts feeling the sweet, tender feelings of drug-induced romance. Giggles and Ash come into the picture, and at first it confused me, like why Dolores would know them at all, but on my second rewatch while they were in the tunnel, Caleb says that he has backup coming. They escape into the subway while Martin and Bernard enter the Insight facility. They discuss Rehoboam and Bernard being of two minds, possible evidence of the Arnold inside Bernard theory, or perhaps pointing to Bernard having the decryption key for the forged data. Martin sends the data to Dolores, and the screen here shows some formative memories. Now, I'm no evil genius, but to reduce risk, I would 100% block anyone from being able to view data about myself other than the machine that I built to, predict the future. It's interesting that he doesn't, but, we may find out otherwise later on. We then see Dolores accessing another file in this matrix of possible simulated pasts and presents. Again, I think it's really odd to show this access of these files alongside possible timelines Rehoboam is predicting, instead of just opening a file and viewing what happened. So I don't know, it leaves a tiny window of uncertainty for me. It's likely just a creative choice, but perhaps Serac has left this information here knowing it's wrong or knowing it's inaccurate, and Dolores is calculating a plot with disinformation. The flashback shows Serac and his brother proving a working Rehoboam system to Liam Dempsey Sr. and the eventual greed that would come from this power. Serac and his brother then chart a course for the entire human race, but then Liam Dempsey began driving outcomes to benefit himself. They lock him out of the system and discover that in roughly 200 years, in every simulation, the world comes unglued. Now, it's interesting word choice, considering Dolores said that her plan was to undo humanity last season. Perhaps 200 years is nothing for beings that never age, and this is all a part of her grand scheme. The next thing we learn about are the outliers that couldn't be predicted or controlled. Serac's brother is one of those brilliant people, and it drove him mad. We then return to the subway and Dolores wanting to open the cage of humanity and show the world what Insight has been doing with their lives. Liam warns that you can't do that it would lead to uncertainty in the system, and perhaps more important, that she would have no clue the effect on the people reading this information. It's easily the most interesting moment of this series to date. The entire world being made aware that their lives are being controlled. Releasing that information means that Rehoboam's entire plot would then be off course at that point. Witnessing how you die immediately makes you change your life and fight against those tropes that the machine sees you as. Now, I think it can be argued that people are impossible to change, and I think the show may take that route, but if you told me that I die on a beach in 10 to 12 years, I'm skipping spring break for the next 10 to 40 years, just in case. However, I have to consider Rehoboam may have also foreseen the release of this data. We don't know the exact divergences yet. We're only, hinted about them. And since the word or, even the image wasn't shown or spoken this episode, who's to say that this wasn't explicitly a part of the plan that leads to Serac's outcome? That's the double-edged sword with simulation omniscience. The showrunners have done a great job in showing that this machine has exploitable weak points, with the outliers and not having a complete data set because of the lacking forged data. But it leaves both doors open. This may wholeheartedly be something that Rehoboam would have never predicted because Dolores and Caleb present too much of a gap in its predictions. Or Serac may be watching this simulated future still very much in control. Now, the ethical side of this is, again, perhaps the most in-depth and worth contemplating thing to happen in this entire series. I think on my first watch, opening the cage to the world was inherently a good thing. Let the people know that they're being placed in boxes, and if that box didn't have a good letter on it, they were discarded, sent to high-risk sectors as cannon fodder. However, Dolores releasing this information does come with potentially catastrophic outcomes, which is literally her point. To say this is inherently a good thing is foolish, because her intentions are not good. I imagine not everyone was affected the same way by Rehoboam. The millionaires of the world likely didn't feel much of anything when this release of information happened. The system worked for them. But if I woke up tomorrow and found that my entire life was a production of someone else, I honestly don't know how I would react. I love this ethical debate, but it could also go on for hours back and forth, right? So I'll leave it to you. Do you think Dolores did something good by releasing this information? If you yourself were in that position and could do anything with that data, what would you do for the greater good of mankind? Now, before we move on, I do want to bring up again this idea of the outlier. We see another person and multiple people this episode get the classification of U. This was Caleb's rating. If Caleb is considered an outlier, someone who makes Rehoboam's predictions that much harder, could everyone with that classification also be outliers? Or, like I discussed at the start of this video, potentially have free will? Since Serac's brother was one of the people that could not be read by the system, could he too have the U classification? Or, as Serac states, his brother is sui generis, meaning unique. We then see them leaving the train station to the tune of Space Odyssey playing in the background, finding the world in disarray. Caleb asks what genre this is, and Giggle replies, reality. Because of this line, I would have said that reality was the final genre that he was told to look out for. But the showrunners have said outright what these genres were, and reality wasn't listed. It was thriller horror. Though I think it's more tongue-in-cheek that they're saying reality is now this thriller horror world that they live in. Then it happens. Caleb sees himself being manipulated by Dolores when she takes the bullets for him. He sees the world that he has helped her create, and I wonder how long it takes until he realizes all of this was her manipulation and it all comes crashing down. Also, these may be Serac's men, but this guy was wearing skinny jeans, so I don't know. Again, I think perhaps these are Rico men still chasing them from the night before. We then come to Serac flying above the clouds, witnessing a large peak in divergence, and him narrating once again. I knew that you and I had built a fragile peace, that one day it would all come crashing down if I failed to act. I think the implication is his brother, as we transition once again to the past in the Matrix of Rehoboam. For 10 years, Liam Dempsey and Serac worked together until one day Liam found the facility that Serac built for the Outliers. He states his inspiration for editing people and eugenics as a whole came from taking radiation medication that halted the genetic breakdown of him and his brother. Notice again, this chart is still at a time when humanity doesn't have a future. At least that's how I'm interpreting it. This is also the scene where he admits the machine sends these outliers to the battlefields or other high-risk sectors, a wood chipper that will eat them up and spit them out dead or useless. Now, I think this facility is potentially the people, these outliers that he doesn't want to send to high-risk sectors in an attempt to edit them or understand them better. We then see Bernard and Martin, who gives him a tablet revealing the place where Serac sends the undesirables, meaning we may see Serac's brother if he is still alive, possibly using him in some way against Serac, which would be pretty interesting. Stubb shows up and goes for round 2, gets interrupted by Martel coming for Martin, and tells Bernard that he is the only one who can't be replaced. I'm thinking again either the Key or Arnold, or perhaps even a form of Dolores exists in some capacity in his mind. We then see Martin blow himself up along with Serac's most trusted henchpeople, and since this is such a drastic death of a character we know very little about, something feels off. Martel here has a line about wanting to be friends with Hale, and that never goes anywhere. So they either just abandoned the meaning of that interaction entirely, or something is not happening when we believe them to be, or something else entirely, possible simulation play. We then come to Dolores and crew back on the beach, this man staring out toward the horizon, likely pointing to him wishing to commit suicide. They talk about what to do with Liam, and he starts off on a tirade about the outliers that they can't fix and that they can't get rid of. He tells Caleb that he is the worst of them. Now, this again paired with him saying earlier, "You think that I killed your friend," I think this points to Caleb having free will and these genuine white spaces where his decision is possible. For whatever reason, he is uncontrollable, and after being sent to the military for being less than, something happens and he takes his friend's life. Liam saying that you are the worst of them is him saying that you're the worst kind of outlier. The flashbacks I think Caleb was seeing were implanted for him to be someone that he doesn't know, when in reality it was his friend. The shot of him in restraints possibly showing him entering the military and getting this implant, or him having these memories altered after the fact. Strictly a theory, we don't have enough evidence to say for sure just yet if this person matters to Caleb's story. We then come to Serac in the sky with diamonds and another accessing of files, showing the moment when Serac decides to kill Liam Dempsey Sr. Liam Dempsey, the greedy capitalist, does have some sliver of humanity left when he realizes that Serac should not be changing the fate of humanity. He acknowledges Liam Dempsey is now the agitator that would prevent his plans from moving forward and the future coming true, and he takes him to the crash site of his private plane. Now, something really important happens before we get to the plane. Liam sees a future where he walks away from this place, but in reality, he dies here, meaning seeing the simulation allows you to take different routes that you otherwise would not take. Serac viewing the possible outcomes means that this is very much still his choice. And like I talked about earlier, now that all of these people are seeing the future laid out for them, they can choose not to take it. Depending, it could also be evidence of Serac allowing Rehoboam to show people incorrect results, which, again, is the reason that Liam joined him at all. He walks away from this. I have to wonder if he's showing Dolores incorrect information to get her to believe that she too would be walking away from this. He goes back to narrating, calling the recipient of this note mon ami, meaning my friend, and stating that he and his brother brought you into this world, and now I've ensured that you will outlive us both. Then it pans out to reveal Dolores talking with Serac. The implication is Serac speaking sweet nothings to Rehoboam because of this deity-level admiration, but everything he says could also apply to creating Dolores, which is also extremely interesting to me. Maybe he believes himself to be, the creator of this future because he allowed Ford to create this. Like, he allowed all of this to happen to get to this point, but, there's something really odd about this interaction. The episode ends with them meeting via hologram, this amazing dialogue between two giants believing themselves to be in the right, and Serac angry over viewing the results that show a large divergence, and a potential tiny gap appearing, showing nothing for humanity once again. Oh, and we also get a scene of a Rico man dropping something off, proving outright that she not only knows about this app, but she has used it for her personal needs. This was an incredible episode. There was a few things that on my first watch I found really odd or off-putting. I think a lot of the editing this episode was really weird, but I don't know. I'm glad that they were brave enough to include the drug-induced transitions with Caleb. On my second watch, I loved this episode so much more. It reminded me of Watchmen with the film noir, and yeah, so many big things happened this episode. I can't wait to see how they top it next week. This honestly could have been a big finale if they altered a couple things. Honestly, the release of this data being a big ending and the sequel being the fight against Serac, I absolutely loved it. But with that, we come to the end of the video. Actually, one final note. My first thought about this large bag was a rocket launcher, just based on the size and my affinity for gaming, but we see her board a jet bound for somewhere that we don't know. Serac is also physically in the air. What if she is trying to bring him down, remove him from his heavenly throne of the sky? Special thank you to the top tier donors this month: Michael Linck, Robert Holtz, Jeff Chunn, Logan, Steve, Elliott Enriquez, Melissa Fassetta, CarlyO, and our newest member, Louise Brooks. Thank you so much. I could not do this without your support. It means so much to me. Much love, everybody, and I can't wait to talk to you all again soon.